If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm gonna get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may.
Welcome to another episode of The School Without Walls. I am Antonio Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program. The program is designed more or less to address the needs of the African American community. The name School Without Walls means that there are so many things that I've experienced that my people need to know that we do not get within the walls of the school. For example, how to dress for success. Let's not stress like it used to be. Recognize the power of authority and things of that nature. I like to list three things briefly. Training young people the importance of good work ethics, teaching that they have a moral duty and obligation to obtain and maintain a system of moral values that would lead them to economic success. Number two, have them to understand that all people are not college material, but yet all can be economically successful. Teach them that the surest and safest way out of poverty to economic success is a good education, etc., etc., etc. And we are encouraging those people in the community, especially the pastors, to more of you get involved in mentoring and males of character in mentoring. My guest today is attorney Michael McCray. Michael McCray grew up here in Pine Bluff, right?
Absolutely.
From permanent family members. You can tell us briefly, your parents are Mr. and Mrs. Dr. and Mrs. You guess you won't say it.
Right. Jackie McCray and Parnell McCray.
Yeah, Parnell McCray. Mother retired. Both of them retired staff people and faculty people here.
Absolutely.
Okay, let us
Actually went to nursery school at UAPB.
You did? Mm-hmm. How about that?
Yes, sir.
And he's the author of this book. Randy, can you get a close-up of this book? It's called Race, what is it?
Race, Power, and Politics. It's Memoirs of an Acorn Whistleblower.
Okay. Now, let's talk about this book, Esquire, Race, Power, and Politics. How did you come up with that title?
Well, it's the title really describes what the Association of Community Organizations for Reform now, ACORN. Mm-hmm. That's really what it's about. I was trying to think of three provocative words that would really distill the essence of ACORN, and most people don't know about. Mm-hmm. And essentially, the reason that I wrote the book is it's written as an inside story about ACORN from somebody who, again, was a reformer and a supporter. I served on the ACORN National Board for 2 years down in Atlanta. And my story is one of someone who came to the organization for all the right reasons, and I want to share with the reader what I learned about this venerable organization. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that hadn't heard of ACORN prior to the 2008 election cycle. Mm-hmm. And so, if you really weren't involved in civil rights or, grassroots organizations, you probably hadn't heard of ACORN. Mm-hmm. But with the election of President Barack Obama, community organizing and his ties to ACORN, became highlighted. Mm-hmm. So from that extent, from that perspective, ACORN is a very powerful and important organization, and no one had written a story about it. I mean, some of the staffers had, but no member or board member had ever tried to tackle what was, telling the story from what it's really like from a member's perspective. And so that's why I wrote the book.
I see. Now, do you have, I believe ACORN was started here in Arkansas, wasn't it?
Yep, absolutely. It was the Arkansas Community Organizations for Reform now, and I guess as it grew in national prominence, they changed the name to association so they could keep the acronym.
How about that? You have an idea what year it was founded?
It was founded in 1970.
1970. I know I remember it from way back, and I remember Arkansans who were involved in it during the civil rights struggle we had here in the state of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. I remember some of the people. Okay, race, power, and politics. Now, well, I think you explained. Did you explain why you wrote it?
Well, yeah, that's the broader. But I explained why, but let me tell you a little bit about how. The reason I got involved with this when I was in law school, and I tell people how I tell the stories that a funny thing happened to me on my way to Wall Street. You know, my background is, as you said, lawyer and accounting. I was planning on becoming an investment banker, having finished. I went to the great Florida A&M School of Business and Industry. And so I graduated from there, and I was planning on going to Wall Street, but I decided to, before doing that, I decided to go to law school. While I was in law school, my governor ran for president, and lo and behold, he won. So I had been a student organizer on the Clinton campaign back in 1992.
You see your governor, I mean, this Clinton?
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
Bill Clinton. Oh, yeah.
And so I was a supporter, and it was a very interesting time then, especially being in Washington, because before he won, you know, it was kind of, some of my classmates were not as positive about the state. And so in 1 year, my governor became the president and the Hogs won the NCAA. so things were things were looking up. So anyway, so I started working I had been working with the campaign as a student organizer, and I got an opportunity to work for the Empowerment Zones program. And at the time, that was the largest community development package in history, well, since the New Deal, since Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs. And it was basically a $4 billion appropriation that was directed at helping to revitalize underserved areas across the country. You know, kind of, you know, my hometown, Pine Bluff, areas in the Arkansas Delta, urban areas. So the program was a White House initiative, but it was funded from HHS, and it was administered jointly by HUD and USDA. I wound up working on the USDA side, and so I very literally was going to school. I was working on a White House initiative in the daytime, going to law school at night and on weekends. I see. And so that's kind of, so I got involved in, you know, public service, and in that sense, it opened my eyes to what really could be done in terms of economic development. So the stuff, I was overjoyed to have the opportunity to use the skills in economic development and finance that I was studying, that I thought I wanted to go to Wall Street for, but we could actually use it to help revitalize underserved areas in my community, kind of like my hometown. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth in economic development. And some of these nonprofit organizations, some of the grants range from $3 million to $40 million to $120 million. My God. And so, this was a whole new way of, you know, a lot of the stuff that we talk about now that's kind of passé, or, you know, public-private partnerships and, you know, this master plan communities. In 1992, this was all cutting-edge stuff. And so I got a lot of great experience, and unfortunately, I became aware of one of the rural grants was being awarded to an organization that really wasn't.
Let us stop on that for break. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Anthony Fernando, a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm also a graduate of UAPB. I'm currently enrolled in the Master of Science in Aquaculture Fisheries program. Thanks to my mentor, Dr. Eggleton, I'm acquiring unique skills needed for future employment.
Since coming to University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, Tony has been involved in a wide range of undergraduate research. Some of this research he plans to publish later this year. UAPB prepares its students for these types of opportunities every day.
UAPB is preparing me.
Try and avoid sneezing into your hand, because you just contaminate them and then spread those germs everywhere. Focus on sneezing into your elbow, like this, and then you don't contaminate your hands. Turn on the water, wet your hands, apply a good amount of soap and lather up, and then focus on washing your hands for about 20 seconds, about the time it takes to sing Happy Birthday twice. Focus on washing the front of your hands, the back, in between the fingers, around the nails, and so on. And then rinse everything off. Use something to wipe your hands after that, preferably something disposable like a paper towel, and then use that to turn off the tap as well. If you get a chance, use that to also open the door to the bathroom as you're leaving. The best way to wash your hands is using running water and soap, but sometimes we don't have that available. So think about carrying with you a hand sanitizer. That should have at least 60% alcohol content.
For more information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
What's up? This is my friend Rob from Michigan.
What's up?
He's a teenager.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Woo! Hey, you want to slow down there?
No.
Really? Oh, okay. What are you doing? We're shooting a viral video. Hold on, I want to see this. Hey, this is his last 5 minutes on Earth. A little something to Mom? Say something to Mom. How about, goodbye, Mom, sorry.
Those of you who just joined us, I'm Anthony O. Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program called The School Without Walls. My guest today is Esquire Michael Purnell, who is the author of this book, Race, Power, and Politics. He also, he's a businessman. We're going to talk a little bit about that business. You have a business too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's deviate for a moment. Tell us what type of business you have right now.
Well, actually the book, the business that I operate now it's American Banner Books. So it's kind of the publishing arm that my book is the first one that we've published.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was kind of speaking earlier, I was working for the federal government and I became a federal whistleblower. And ultimately I discovered that there was $40 million worth of waste, fraud, and abuse that basically a empowerment zone got funded that shouldn't have been funded.
Mm-hmm.
So long and short of it is I stood up for the people and I was trying to do the right thing.
You became a whistleblower.
I became a whistleblower.
Define a whistleblower for us. What does that mean?
A whistleblower is someone who discovers waste or fraud in the government or corporation, and usually they try to work within the system to correct it, but ultimately they may wind up going to either Congress or the media. So for me the key characteristic of being a whistleblower is somebody someone who sees wrong and tries to do the right thing.
Okay.
And that's ultimately what it is.
Okay, tell us a little bit about what you saw, if you will.
Well, and what I saw was there was a grant application that was not a grant-worthy organization. And what I mean by that is the organization didn't have the capacity to manage and handle a $40 million grant. And I knew it because I was I was in charge of the grant applications and some of the scoring. So I had personal knowledge that this particular application was not up to snuff, but I discovered that it was getting funded for $40 million.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
How much territory did that cover at
well,
$40 million?
$40 million for a rural zone, again, part of the program, one of the characteristics of the program is it was about leveraging federal dollars. So it was not just the $40 million, because the $40 million was a seed. The average leverage factor, I think at that point in time, was something like 17 to 18 to 1. So literally, you're talking about a $40 million grant was worth basically $500 million.
And Acorn,
in terms of
one of the chapters of Acorn did this?
Well, no, it wasn't. At this point in time, I wasn't involved in I hadn't gotten involved in Acorn yet.
Okay.
But this episode of my life is how I became a federal whistleblower. And once I blew the whistle on it, because this was money that should have helped to revitalize really the Mississippi Delta area. But because the organization that was funded was not worthy, for the most part, that opportunity was lost. And so the development impact here, the opportunity cost was tremendous.
What happened to the money?
Wasted.
Just when you say wasted,
I mean, went to projects that weren't sustainable. Some of it was outright. I mean, some of it was outright theft. But it did not work. That was
a lot
one
of salaries and things to people.
Well, some salaries, some consultants. I mean, it's kind of hard to waste $40 million, but it was done, and it was probably the least most effective empowerment zone. And it was one that never should have been funded in the first place.
And that's in this book?
I talk about that briefly in the book because that's how I became a whistleblower. And I suffered retaliation at USDA. As a matter of fact, I'm still fighting USDA even to this day.
I would think so, right?
Yeah. But ultimately what happened then is I decided I wasn't going to be a victim, I was going to become an advocate. And so that's why I started to work with other First Amendment groups and other whistleblower organizations. And we started to have conferences, and I was telling you before about a trip to Washington. Well, there's this thing that's called Washington Whistleblower Week, that for the last 7 years, whistleblowers from around the country have been meeting with other nonprofit organizations and some labor unions, and we have conferences on Capitol Hill. I've been personally involved in organizing really the last 3 conferences, and now they're known as the Whistleblower Summit for Civil and Human Rights. And so that's one of the things that, we've recently given what we call a Pillar Human Rights Award for notable people, whether they're legislators or community activists. some media personalities, for people that stand up for First Amendment protections and whistleblowers. Last year we gave one to Senator Charles Grassley, and actually there was a picture of that in the commercial about a year ago. Most recently we've given one to Representative Marcia Fudge.
We have about 2 minutes before this section is in. Let me ask you this. Where do you get the money to do all this organizing? It requires money, doesn't it, to have a conference and all that?
Yeah, well, some of the organizations are large, the Government Accountability Project, but there are also individual whistleblowers. The people, there's some smaller groups, NGOs, small associations, and some individuals. So there's a wide variety of people. The organizations chip in, sometimes the individuals chip in, and we kind of, I call it a potluck. Where everybody, the different organizations bring their different issues and strategies together, and once a year we talk about it.
And it's strictly looked upon as legitimate business. I mean, it's legitimate, right?
Oh,
you're not.
No,
it's an open thing.
No, absolutely. No, we're on Capitol Hill, and I was about to say that we gave a pillar award to Rand Paul. I mean, whistleblowing is transpartisan. It's one of the few places where you can get Chuck Grassley and Maxine Waters on the same page. And that's one of the things that's very, it's very powerful for me. So we've been a part of organizing the conference. We sell whistleblower books. There are other advocates that come. We have a film screening. We do documentaries.
Now, what does this book sell for?
This book, it's $28 in hardback and $20 paperback.
And this is your personal book here, not organization's book, right?
Right. Well, this is the first book that is being published under American Banner Books, but our goal is to publish other whistleblower stories. This is one of many, and it's a publishing company that I've created.
Okay, and it was this book was printed where? I hadn't looked at it. I'm sure it's on here. Where was it printed?
Well, actually, it was printed in Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, Tennessee. I see. Okay, let's stop on that note, and we'll be back in just a few minutes for the third segment.
Hi. My name is Danny Andre Burrell II, a senior here majoring in industrial technology, management, and applied engineering. I thought that I would be looking for a job at this point, but thanks to my mentor, Dr. Charles Colin, and Career Services, I was able to obtain a position as an industrial engineer upon graduation.
Danny worked hard in class from the beginning, obtaining 3 internships while on campus. UAPB can help prepare students like Danny for those same opportunities.
UAPB prepared me.
A full life, measured in seats, starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Learn how to prevent deaths and injuries by using the right car seat for your child's age and size.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. That single ember can ignite and destroy your home or even your community. You can't control where that ember will land, only what happens when it does. Get Fire Adapted now at fireadapted.org.
Those of you who have just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host and founder of this television program called The School Without Walls. My guest is attorney Michael Purnell. Oh, not
McCray.
McCray. Purnell is his dad.
Yes.
Michael McCray. And he has authored a book called Race, Power, and Politics. And it's dealing with whistleblowers. And of course, I'm pretty sure this is, the idea of whistleblowers is not a everyday word. We don't just hear it every day, right? It's not something that it's a common word. So again, who is the whistleblower?
Right. Well, Dr. Hobbs, and it's funny, we talk about whistleblowers. That's one of the topics. Who is a whistleblower and what is a whistleblower at the conference, at the Whistleblower Summit. But again, people have different definitions, but the one that I use is someone who sees wrong and tries to right it. And usually it's done that it's not really for selfish purposes, but there are people that go at risk to tell the truth and speak truth to power. And actually it can be a very devastating thing when you suffer all types of retaliation. But for instance, not everyone who discloses information is really a whistleblower. For instance, the example I use is, let's say John Gotti. Sammy the Bull Gravone gave information about the Gambino crime family, but Sammy the Bull is not a whistleblower. After he was caught, he turned state's evidence in order to cut a deal. But that's not,
that's not a whistleblower.
Right, that's not a whistleblower.
He's trying to benefit himself.
Exactly, exactly. So that was after, after the fact. As a matter of fact, after he was caught.
I see.
So so people, when there's someone who tries to do right, who stands up when they really don't have to, and that's what makes whistleblowers kind of special. And even we talked about it in our conference. Whistleblowing actually goes back to 1778 was when the Congress passed the first whistleblower law, and that was the Continental Congress. So whistleblowing, the founding fathers looked at whistleblowing just like any other aspect of the First Amendment, that this was a way that people had to stand up and fight a tyrannical government. So whistleblowing, placed in its proper perspective, it's really patriotic.
I got you.
And so that's one of the things that we talk about at the summit, and that's one of the messages that we're trying to get out there.
Now, anything else, anything in the book you'd like to talk about, please do so.
Okay, well, ultimately, Dr. Hobbs, after I became a federal whistleblower, other people started to come to me they had questions and wanted advice. Ultimately, what happened was people from Acorn, I had, at that point in time, I was no longer in the organization, but my friends from Acorn came to me after there was a multi-million-dollar embezzlement that was reported in the New York Times.
Right.
And so they came to me for advice: how do we help the organization? How do we reform the organization? What should we do? And so that was kind of where my journey with Acorn and this book, Race, Power, and Politics, kind of picks up. And so it was like, when I got into Acorn, what did I learn? When I saw things that started to go wrong, what did we do? And so, in a nutshell, I describe it as this: if you imagine that 8 people didn't drink the Kool-Aid at Jamestown, what would have happened? And so that's kind of what, it's a hero's tale, and it's really told through the eyes of from my point of view, and a board member named Marcel Reed, and she's a really courageous person.
What does she do for a living now? She's a whistleblower?
Well, she's also a whistleblower, but she's actually she works with other nonprofit groups and governmental organizations. She's working with Pacifica right now, Pacifica Radio.
I see.
Yep.
Now, Acorn doesn't exist anymore, am I correct?
Technically, Acorn formally dissolved 2 or 3 years ago. And there are some questions, and it's kind of interesting now because the Congress is still trying to defund Acorn, which seems silly. But the reality is that there are a number of organizations that sprang up from the bones of Acorn.
Is that right?
So the Acorn itself, the umbrella, it no longer exists, but there are community organizations that still exist from coast to coast.
So the main reason it went down as a national organization is because of that corruption you just mentioned?
Well, the corruption, what wound up happening is the right had been attacking Acorn for a number of years for purported voter fraud and infractions. That's most of that stuff was a red herring. But ultimately, the pressure that was placed on Acorn there was a gentleman by the name of James O'Keefe and Hannah Giles. They were the people that dressed up kind of as a fake pimp and prostitute, and they did this sting video. It was highly edited, highly doctored. That caused a lot of consternation and a lot of negative publicity, and the funding dried up for Acorn. Ultimately, it was published by Andrew Breitbart on Big Government, and there was such a sensationalism that was created by it. Congress backed off of Acorn, and then the other funders did likewise. From my perspective, Acorn would not have been subject to that type of tactic had they actually cleaned the house and reformed itself following the embezzlement. So what I tell people is, had Acorn listened to the real whistleblowers, they would not have been vulnerable to this street demonstration. And so it's one of those things where oftentimes we find ourselves that whistleblowers are really the canary in the coal mine. And more people need to listen to whistleblowers, and we wouldn't have so many problems.
We have about 2 minutes now. Am I correct? We had a conversation prior to this concerning your interest in making a film. Am I correct? In producing something?
Right.
Tell me about that. What is that?
Well, actually, Dr. Hobbs, as we were discussing this, the Whistleblower Summit it's an incredible thing where different people from all across the country come and they share these stories. And one thing, win, lose, or draw, the success rate for whistleblowers is actually quite low. Statistically, it's less than 3% of people, quote unquote, win their cases. But what I've learned over the last 6 or 7 years is some of my best friends are whistleblowers, and every whistleblower I know has an incredible story. Win, lose, or draw, it's speaking truth to power, grace under pressure, the courage to stand up, what goes on with their family life. There are all these human stories.
Oh, yeah.
And so what I want to do is to go ahead and start to capture some of those, the stories of real individual whistleblowers.
Document that on a DVD.
Exactly, to document
video,
that.
yeah.
Absolutely, and along with the stories of the organizations that pass whistleblower laws and the Congress people who support whistleblower protection. So I think that would be a dynamite project. And again, when we have the summit every year, we have whistleblowers from all across the country that come to one spot.
I see. Do we have any whistleblowers in Arkansas other than yourself?
I'm sure there are. I'm not that
you're acquainted with.
Yeah. Well, there's some. There's Beverly Burkett is blowing the whistle on a bunch of illegality and discrimination at USDA. Actually, on the 50th anniversary of Medgar Evers' assassination, we had a rally in front of the federal building to talk about her case. She's fighting USDA.
Which federal? That's Arkansas?
Yeah, Pine Bluff.
Oh,
not Arkansas, Pine Bluff.
When did that happen?
That was, I forgot the date, June.
Okay, so to keep me abreast on stuff like that, I like an interest,
Absolutely.
But look, we got to sign off here.
Oh, all right.
Nice to have had you.
Thank you, sir.
And keep the faith.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Pine Bluff.
All right.